I can still remember the exact moment, how her words hit me like a cold gust of wind, knocking the breath right out of my chest. "I think it's time we end things," she said, her voice wavering slightly but steady enough to make my blood run cold. "I want someone younger." At first I thought I misheard her. I mean, how could she say that after everything we had been through? We had spent 25 years together, raised children, built a home, a life. This couldn't be real. My hands were shaking as I reached for the glass of water in front of me. But it slipped from my grip, splashing onto the table. My throat felt tight. The room seemed to shrink, as if the walls were closing in on me. My heart was hammering against my ribcage, but the silence that followed her words was deafening. It felt like the world was collapsing. She had always been my everything. But in that moment it became clear. I was nothing to her. I stood there, paralyzed by shock and disbelief, trying to wrap my mind around what she had just said. How could she want to throw everything away? Did I fail her? Had I missed something all these years? Something that would explain her sudden need for someone else, someone younger? But the truth of it was simple, and she didn't sugarcoat it. She was done. She wanted out. And in a heartbeat, everything I had known for so long, the foundation of my life, came crumbling down. I had built my world around this marriage, around her. Our children, our home, our shared memories, every single piece of me was tied to her. I thought we were fine. No, I knew we were fine. But now, standing there with her words hanging in the air between us, I realized that everything I had worked for, everything I held dear, was slipping away. I couldn't let go of that. I couldn't accept it. "Is this really happening?" I asked, the words barely audible, as if speaking too loud might make it all real. She didn't answer at first, but the look on her face, the distance in her eyes, told me everything I needed to know. She had already made her decision, and no matter how much I wanted to fix it, no matter how hard I pleaded, I knew there was nothing I could say. She had already moved on. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me. I had no words left, just this unbearable knot of emotion gnawing at me. But I knew one thing. If I didn't fight for us, if I didn't try to hold on, I would lose everything. Then she did something I never saw coming. She stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. Without another word, she walked out. And just like that, I was left standing there alone, in the cold silence of our once shared space. Alone. Could I somehow fix this? Could I find a way to turn back time? Or was this truly the end? The days that followed were filled with an unbearable silence. She didn't come home that night. I lay awake in the bed we had shared for over 2 decades, staring at the ceiling, trying to grasp the reality of what had just happened. Her side of the bed, once warm and familiar, was now an empty void. I could feel the weight of her absence pressing down on me, heavier than any physical burden I'd ever carried. It wasn't just the absence of her presence. It was the absence of the future we had built together. Our history, our children, everything we had worked toward. It was all being swept away piece by piece, and I had no idea how to stop it. I turned to the other side of the bed, running my hand over the soft sheets, still smelling faintly of her perfume. I wanted to pick up the phone, to text her, to beg her to come back. But I knew that wouldn't help. She had already made her decision, and every time I tried to reach out, every attempt to cling to the life I thought we had, she only grew colder. Her words echoed in my mind. "I want someone younger." Each repetition of the phrase brought with it a new sting, a deeper wound. I couldn't fathom how she could just discard everything we had, everything we had shared, like it was nothing. I had been there for her through everything, through the late nights with sick kids, the long hours of work, the ups and downs of our relationship, and yet in the end it wasn't enough. I spent the entire night awake, the darkness of the room swallowing me whole. There was no comfort in sleep, no peace in the quiet of the night. My thoughts were like a whirlwind, tearing through my mind with no direction, no release. I thought about the times we laughed together, the plans we made, the dreams we built side by side. I thought about our children, about the family we had created. How could she just throw it all away? In the morning, I tried to act normal. I got up, made coffee, and sat in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair across from me. The silence was suffocating. The house, once full of life and laughter, felt hollow. Every corner, every room was a reminder of the woman who had once filled this space with warmth and love. Now there was nothing, no sound, no presence. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling. I needed to hear her voice, to understand what had happened. But when I called, she didn't pick up. I left a message trying to sound calm, though my voice betrayed me, shaking with the weight of my emotions. Please just talk to me. We need to talk. I don't understand what's happening. I hit send, but even as I did, I knew it wasn't enough. She had already made up her mind. And I was just a casualty in her decision. The house felt more like a prison with each passing hour. I tried to distract myself, reading, cleaning, anything to avoid the crushing reality of what was happening. But every room, every corner was a reminder of the life we had built together. It was hard to breathe with the walls closing in on me. I wanted to scream, to rage against the injustice of it all, but there was no one to scream to. There was no one who could hear me. I needed answers, but she was gone. I was left alone with my thoughts, my grief, and my self-doubt. How could I have missed it? How could I have been so blind to the cracks in our relationship? I kept asking myself what I could have done differently, how I could have prevented this, but the answers never came. Only more questions, more pain, and then came the phone call. It was late afternoon, the light filtering through the windows, casting long shadows on the floor. My phone rang and I saw her name flash on the screen. My heart skipped a beat and for a moment I froze. I debated whether to pick up. What would I say? What would she say? But I couldn't let the silence stretch any longer. I had to know. I had to hear it from her. Hello? I said, my voice rough, unsure of what to expect. I've made my decision, she said, her voice calm but distant. A divorce lawyer will be contacting you soon. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My body went numb and I struggled to keep my breath steady. This was it. The moment I had feared. The moment I knew was coming but never truly believed. She was ending it, ending us. I was powerless and it felt like she was sealing the door on us forever. The finality of it crushed me. Is this really happening? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. Yes, she said softly. I'm sorry, but it's time. The line went silent for a moment and I could feel my chest tighten. Every ounce of emotion I had been holding back, every bit of pain, anger, and grief came crashing down at once. I wanted to shout, to beg her to reconsider, to make her see the love we had shared, the years we had spent together. But I couldn't find the words. There was nothing left to say. She had made her decision, and I was left standing in the ruins of what used to be. I don't know what to say, I said, my voice barely audible. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix this, she replied, the finality in her voice cutting through me like a knife. It's over. She hung up before I could say anything else, and just like that, everything changed. My world, once steady and familiar, was now a shattered mess. I was left with nothing but the echo of her words and the weight of her absence. I stood there staring at the phone, my heart racing. The finality of her words hung in the air like a heavy cloud, suffocating me. Was there any way to stop this? Could I ever get her back? Or was this truly the end of everything? I met with the lawyer that day. The office was sterile, cold, like the atmosphere that had settled over my life. I sat in the leather chair, watching the lawyer shuffle through the papers in front of him. His fingers moved with mechanical precision as he handed me the first document, a legal petition for divorce. The words on the page were sharp, calculated, and final. I couldn't escape the weight of them. Couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that this wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a contract for the dismantling of everything I had built. The financial settlements were detailed and complex. The custody arrangements for the kids. Nothing was simple anymore. It was all laid out in cold, unforgiving terms, and I could see no way around it. The life I thought I would continue living, the love I had built my world around, was now being torn apart. Every time I read a new line, a new term, I felt something inside me breaking. There was no escape from the truth, no turning back. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to have to fight this fight. My whole world had shifted and I had no control over it. This wasn't just about her wanting someone younger. This was about the very core of my existence, the life I had built, the identity I had tied to her and to our family. The pain was overwhelming. It wasn't just the legal jargon. It was the realization that everything was changing, and I didn't know how to make it stop. The lawyer spoke, his voice distant, detached from the storm of emotions that churned inside me. He explained the details of the settlement, each one more damning than the last. I could hear him, but his words barely registered. The numbers, money, assets, everything we had shared, now seemed trivial in comparison to the life I was losing. How had it all come to this? How could I sit here and listen to him explain the end of everything I thought I knew? As he continued, I felt a surge of frustration. I was supposed to be a man in control, a man who could weather storms, who could protect his family, his dignity. But now I was sitting here stripped of that power. I had no answers. I had no plan. Just these damn papers staring back at me, like the sentence of a man already condemned. I could feel the room closing in. I could feel the weight of every decision I had made, every misstep, every moment of self-doubt. Was this really happening? Was this the consequence of everything I had sacrificed for her, for us? Was this how it all ended? I tried to focus, tried to listen, but I couldn't. My thoughts kept spiraling, reminding me of the betrayal, the broken promises. She had wanted someone younger, someone new. But what did that mean for me? Who was I now without her? What was left of the man who had stood beside her for 25 years? The lawyer looked at me, his expression impassive, waiting for a response. I could feel his eyes on me, but all I could do was stare at the papers. The ink on the pages was now a reminder of everything I had lost, everything I had failed to hold on to. I need to think about this, I said, my voice shaky. The words felt hollow. There was nothing to think about. This was it. This was the end. And yet, I didn't know how to accept it. The lawyer nodded, unfazed by my words, and handed me the divorce petition. The paper was heavier than it should have been. As I took it from him, my fingers trembled. I felt the edges of the paper cut into my skin, a small, painful reminder of the weight of this moment. This wasn't just paperwork. This was the end of my world as I knew it. I looked down at the petition, reading the first few lines, each word a dagger to my heart. The legalities didn't matter to me, not in that moment. What mattered was that everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for, was being reduced to a few cold, harsh words. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I couldn't break down here. Not in front of him, not in front of anyone. I had to hold it together, but the more I read, the more it sank in. This was it. There was no turning back. I was standing on the precipice of my old life with no clear path forward. I had no idea how to move forward, how to face the future that awaited me. The lawyer gave me a few more instructions, but I wasn't really listening anymore. My mind was spinning. My heart was heavy with grief and confusion. I stood up, shaking the man's hand absent-mindedly, still holding the divorce papers. My fingers were numb from the weight of them. As I left the office, I felt like I was walking through a fog. The city around me was bustling, people moving with purpose, their lives continuing without a second thought to the chaos in mine. I walked through the streets, not really seeing anything, just feeling the crushing weight of the reality I had to face. Could I fight my way back? Could I salvage anything from this wreckage? Or would I crumble under the pressure of everything that had been lost? The moment I stepped outside, the full weight of what was happening hit me like a tidal wave. I couldn't just walk away from everything we had, could I? But the divorce papers in my hand were like a chain, dragging me toward an uncertain future. Would I fight for my marriage, for my family? Or had I already lost everything I loved? I woke up one morning and realized I couldn't live like this anymore. The silence in the house had become deafening, the weight of my own thoughts pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. It was the same routine. Wake up, sit at the kitchen table, stare at the walls, and wonder where everything went wrong. I had spent weeks, maybe months, letting the ache of her absence consume me. But that morning something shifted. I didn't want to spend another day wallowing in the past. I had to rebuild. I couldn't keep letting her decision control my life. I needed to find something new, something for me. It felt impossible. How could I reinvent myself after 25 years of being defined by my marriage? Who was I if I wasn't her husband? What was left of me, of the man I thought I knew without her by my side? These questions lingered in my mind, threatening to drown me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of defiance. Maybe I didn't need all the answers right away. Maybe it was enough to just take the first step. The emotional stakes were high, my ability to rediscover myself, to reinvent who I was after 2.5 decades of living for someone else was critical. If I didn't succeed, I risked being lost in the rubble of a broken relationship, unable to stand on my own. I wasn't ready to fade into the background, to let this divorce define me. There had to be more to life than this. So I did the only thing I could think of. I made small changes. The first was simple. I took down the pictures of us that hung on the walls. I hadn't realized until then how much of our life was plastered everywhere. Our wedding photo in the living room, our vacations in frames on every shelf. It felt like the walls were closing in, suffocating me with our history. I didn't want to erase her, but I couldn't keep living in a house that was a shrine to everything we had lost. Next, I picked up the camera again. Photography had always been a passion of mine, something I'd put aside in the chaos of raising kids, maintaining a job, and, frankly, living in her shadow. But that morning, I dusted off my old camera and headed outside. It was the smallest of acts, but it felt like a declaration. It was my first real step toward reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried for so long. The world outside was still there, waiting for me to engage with it. I walked through the city, camera in hand, unsure of what I was looking for. The streets were bustling, people moving in and out of shops, cars honking as they rushed to wherever they were going. I didn't belong in the world of movement anymore. I was stuck, frozen in time, but as I lifted the camera to my eye, something changed. I clicked the shutter, capturing a fleeting moment of beauty. An old man sitting in the park, his face lit by the sun as he read a newspaper. A child chasing pigeons in the square, the colors of autumn painting the trees in rich golds and reds. The city wasn't frozen. It was alive, vibrant, and I was part of it, even if I didn't feel like I belonged. But it wasn't easy. The struggle was tougher than I had expected. Every time I raised the camera, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Her absence, her decision to leave. How do I move on when the pain is so fresh? How do I embrace the world when it feels like the life I knew has been stolen from me? I snapped more photos, hoping that each shot would somehow fill the void inside. But the emptiness was always there, lurking beneath the surface. I wasn't ready to let go of what we had, not yet. Yet as I continued to walk, something shifted. For the first time, I started seeing the world as something more than a reminder of my heartbreak. It was a place to begin again, a canvas to paint my new life on. The city had a way of reminding me that life moved on, whether I was ready or not. And maybe that was the point. Life didn't wait for you to heal. It didn't stop because you were broken. It just kept moving forward, like the cars in traffic, like the people in the street. And for the first time, I wanted to move with it. As I walked through the park, I found myself sitting on a bench, looking through the photos I had taken. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting long shadows on the ground. The world felt so alive around me, and yet I was still stuck in this place of grief and loss. But in that moment, I realized something important. The world wasn't waiting for me to heal, but it was still offering me a way forward. It wasn't about forgetting her or pretending like I was fine. It was about finding a new rhythm for my life, one step at a time. I looked down at my camera and realized that for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just going through the motions. I was living again. It wasn't much, but it was something. The world was still out there, waiting for me to engage with it. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to embrace it without feeling like I was betraying my past. The phone rang as I sat on the bench, but I didn't answer it. It was her. And for the first time, I didn't feel the overwhelming need to pick up, to fix things, to explain myself. I had been so focused on saving our marriage, on salvaging something from the wreckage, that I hadn't stopped to ask myself what I wanted. And now, for the first time in months, I could hear the answer. I didn't need her to complete me. I could stand on my own. As I walked back home that evening, camera in hand, I knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be days when I felt lost, days when the grief would feel like too much to bear. But in that moment, I also knew something else. I was no longer trapped in the past. I was moving forward, even if it was just one small step at a time. And that was enough for now. I still hadn't picked up the phone when I got home. The tension hung in the air, thick and unresolved. Would I answer it? Would I let her back in, or would I let this chapter of my life close for good? I wasn't sure, but the phone call was a reminder that, whether I was ready or not, life was pushing me forward. Would I be strong enough to face it? Or would I let the past drag me back into the darkness? It was an ordinary Tuesday when I ran into her. I wasn't expecting to see her, not at the grocery store of all places. But there she was, standing at the end of the aisle, browsing the produce like she was still part of my life. My heart caught in my throat, a strange mixture of surprise and disbelief flooding me. How could she just exist so effortlessly in a world that no longer included me? For the first time in weeks, I saw her, really saw her. And in that moment, I didn't feel the familiar pang of rage or desperation. I didn't feel anything at all. There was no flood of emotion, no boiling anger, no desperate ache for reconciliation. There was just nothing. a numbness so deep, it almost felt like freedom. I remember how she looked standing there with her grocery cart, flipping through a bunch of bananas as if she were alone in the world. She hadn't changed, not really. Her posture, the way her hair fell, the soft curve of her lips, it was all the same. But the woman I had known, the woman I had loved for so long, felt like a distant memory. The familiarity of her presence should have sparked something inside me, but instead, I just watched, detached. There was no confrontation, no exchange of sharp words or desperate pleas. There was only silence, thick and suffocating. The moment stretched on, too long, too quiet. But in that silence, something shifted inside me. I realized I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I wasn't waiting for her to say something, for her to take the first step. I was no longer the man who needed her approval, her love, her validation. I wasn't fighting for something I had already lost. I was standing in the aisle of a grocery store, staring at her, and all I could feel was nothing. It was a strange, peaceful kind of nothing, and it was everything I needed in that moment. I don't know why I said it. Maybe it was the way she seemed to look through me, or maybe it was the way time had worn away the edges of my anger, but I said something. Just a simple greeting, something small and almost dismissive. "Hey." She turned to face me, her eyes flickering with the same recognition that I had felt, but there was no warmth in them, just a coolness that felt foreign. She barely even smiled, just nodded, her face unreadable. We exchanged a few words, awkward and clipped, but nothing of consequence. There was no attempt to bridge the gap between us, no sudden revelation or outpouring of emotions. It was as if we were two strangers, caught in a brief moment of shared history, a history neither of us knew how to navigate anymore. And then, as I walked away, I realized that the battle was no longer about her. It wasn't about winning her back, proving I was still worth something, or even salvaging what we had. No. The battle had shifted, almost imperceptibly, into something else. It was about me. I had already won, not by staying in the fight, but by walking away from it. Walking away from the fear that had kept me tethered to the past. Walking away from the obsession with her approval, from the need to hold on to what we had lost. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt a flicker of peace. It wasn't a loud, triumphant kind of peace, but a quiet, steady one. The kind that slowly fills the cracks in your soul when you stop fighting and start accepting. I left the store, my hands still gripping the cart as if to steady myself. But the air felt different now. Lighter. Like I had finally shed something heavy, something that had weighed me down for far too long. I wasn't sure if it was the end of the story or the beginning of a new chapter, but it didn't matter. I was no longer defined by her, by what we had been, or by what I thought I needed. I walked out of that store and into the sunlight, feeling the warmth of it on my skin. The city stretched out before me, alive and chaotic as ever, and for the first time in months I didn't feel like I was chasing something. I wasn't looking over my shoulder for her, hoping for her to return, or even for some kind of reconciliation. No, I was simply moving forward, one step at a time. But even as I felt the peace beginning to settle in my bones, a question lingered in the back of my mind. Could I truly embrace this new life without feeling like I was betraying my past? Could I reconcile who I had been with who I was becoming? I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't expect to. But in that moment, I realized something profound. I didn't need to have all the answers to take the next step. I just needed to keep moving forward. I had already started the process of reinvention, and it was messy, uncertain, and painful, but it was mine. I had taken the first step toward peace, not by winning her back, but by finally letting go. As I walked through the streets of the city, the weight of the past felt just a little bit lighter. And I knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be mine to walk. The first step toward peace had been taken, and that was enough. I didn't know what would come next, whether she would reach out, whether I'd ever get the closure I thought I needed, or if I was truly ready to face the next chapter of my life. But in that moment, I understood something new. Peace wasn't something that could be given to me, but something I had to claim for myself. And now, for the first time, I was starting to believe that I could. The divorce was final. The papers were signed. The ink on the contract felt like a death sentence, but not just for the marriage. It was as though the words had carved out a part of me, something I couldn't get back. I sat in the empty house, the walls echoing with the absence of laughter, of the ordinary hum of daily life that used to fill the rooms. The silence was deafening. The living room, once a space where we shared stories over dinner, now felt like a museum of things that no longer had meaning. The photos on the walls, the old couch where we spent our weekends, even the coffee mug I always used, all of it had lost its warmth. But as I sat there, staring into the emptiness, something strange began to settle in. I wasn't angry anymore. There was no fiery need for revenge, no wild urge to win her back to prove that I was still worth something. No, this feeling wasn't about her anymore. It had never really been about her, had it? I had been fighting for the wrong reasons. I had convinced myself that I was trying to save her, trying to fix what we had broken. But the truth was, I had been trying to save myself. I had built my entire identity around us, around this family we had created. My self-worth had been tied to her love, her approval, and the life we had built together. When she walked out, it wasn't just her absence that cut me to the core. It was the absence of everything I had believed about myself. What was at risk now wasn't just a relationship, a partnership. It was my emotional survival. Could I face this new life head-on? Or would I remain frozen in the past, haunted by the ghosts of a love that no longer existed, the ghosts of a future that I had so desperately clung to, even as it slipped away through my fingers? The weight of the question pressed down on me like a vice. How do you let go of a life you thought you were meant to live? How do you shed a skin that's been with you for so long that you don't even know who you are without it? There was no manual for this kind of grief, no roadmap to guide you when everything that once made sense suddenly feels like a lie. Externally, I was adjusting to my new reality. I had to. The house was too big now, too silent. I had to figure out how to live alone again, how to move through each day without wondering if she would be there when I got home. The kitchen, once filled with her voice as she hummed to the radio while she cooked, was now a cold, empty space. The bed I had shared with her was now just a place for me to toss and turn in the stillness, trying to figure out how to sleep without the comfort of her presence beside me. But the external changes were easy compared to the internal ones. That was where the real battle was. How could I let go of the love I once felt for her? How could I let go of the life I thought we would have forever? The life I had worked so hard to build? How do you move on when the person you thought you'd grow old with isn't part of your future anymore? Was it even possible to close the door completely, to stop looking back? The questions hung in the air like smoke swirling around me, filling the space I had no idea how to fill. And then, one evening, as I was sitting at the kitchen table, half-heartedly scrolling through the news on my phone, the phone rang. I looked at the screen. Her name flashed across the display. My heart stopped for a moment. I didn't want to answer. Part of me was terrified that this call would be another in a long series of finalities, another harsh reminder of what I had lost. But another part of me, the part I had been avoiding, was desperate to hear her voice, to know why she was calling, what she wanted. Was this the moment of reconciliation I had been secretly hoping for? Or was it just another reminder of the life I was no longer a part of? I hesitated for a few seconds, my finger hovering over the screen. My thoughts raced, but in the end I picked up. Hello? Her voice on the other end was softer than I had expected, almost tentative. Hey. She paused, and I could hear the uncertainty in her words. How are you doing? I didn't know how to answer. How do you answer that question when your world has just shattered? When everything you thought you knew about yourself and your future is hanging by a thread? I'm getting by, I said, my voice rough. It felt like a lie, but it was the truth. I was getting by. That's all I could do right now. We talked for a few minutes, the conversation drifting like an old river that had run dry. There were no deep apologies, no confessions of love, no grand gestures. Just small words exchanged like we were two strangers who shared a history but didn't know how to talk about it anymore. And as I hung up the phone, something inside me settled. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was something closer. I realized that the battle had shifted again. It wasn't about her or even us. It was about me, about who I was becoming in the aftermath of all of this. I had been so focused on saving her, saving us, that I had forgotten to save myself. I walked away from that phone call with no more answers than I had before, but with something new, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, I was on the right path. I wasn't looking for reconciliation anymore. I wasn't waiting for closure. I was learning to live without her, learning to build something for myself out of the pieces of my past and the uncertainty of my future. But the road ahead was still long. Would I ever really be able to let go of the life we had shared? Could I stop feeling like I was betraying the love I once had for her? These were questions I didn't have answers to yet. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid to face them. I had taken the first step toward peace, and it wasn't about her. It was about me. As I sat there, looking at the phone that had just ended the conversation, I realized that I was no longer waiting for her. I had stopped hoping for a resolution, a return to what we had. But the question still lingered. Could I really leave the past behind, or would I continue to carry it with me, heavy as a stone in my chest? I made a choice that day. Not a decision I expected to make, certainly not a choice I thought I'd have to confront so soon. But there it was. Clear, undeniable, and final. I would let go of the past and embrace the future, whatever it held. I didn't need closure anymore, nor did I need an apology. What I needed was to be free. The thought settled over me like a weight being lifted, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was able to breathe fully again. The air didn't feel thick, didn't feel heavy with regret or resentment. I had spent so many days clinging to the hope of answers. Why she left, what went wrong, if I could fix it. I had burned myself out, trying to make sense of something that could never be understood. The truth was, some things don't have answers. Some wounds don't ever fully heal, but they can fade, with time, and with effort. What was at risk now wasn't just my emotional survival. It was my ability to move forward. I had spent so long tied to her, to the life we built together, that I had forgotten what it was like to stand alone. The truth was, I wasn't just letting go of her. I was letting go of the version of myself that had existed in that world. I was letting go of the belief that I had to be defined by someone else's love or rejection or approval. I was ready to live for myself again, to reclaim the pieces of me I had lost in the fog of heartbreak. Externally, everything was changing. The divorce was final. My home was no longer a place filled with shared memories. It was an empty shell that I was trying to fill with something new, something real. I was alone in the physical sense, but something else had shifted. I was starting to realize that being alone didn't have to mean being lonely. I didn't need someone else to complete me. I had spent so many years trying to find validation through the lens of a relationship, and now I had to learn how to validate myself. I began making small but significant changes in my life. I reconnected with friends I hadn't spoken to in years, started picking up old hobbies that I had abandoned. I even joined a community group just to remind myself that I still belonged somewhere, that there were places where I wasn't defined by my past. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all a temporary fix, a distraction from the deeper work I still had to do. That work was to forgive myself, to stop holding on to the guilt of things I couldn't change. I had stayed too long. I had lost myself in a love that wasn't meant to be, but I didn't need to keep punishing myself for it. Internally, the battle was quieter, but just as fierce. It wasn't the anger or sadness anymore that consumed me. It was the quiet acceptance, the realization that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes love isn't even the point. I had spent so much time believing that love was the ultimate solution, the answer to everything. I had believed that if I just tried hard enough, if I just loved her enough, everything would work out. But that was never the case, was it? No amount of love could change her decision. No amount of fighting could win her back. So I forgave myself for that, for staying too long, for letting myself believe in something that was never going to be. And as I stood there looking out at the sunset, the soft golden hues of the fading light casting long shadows across the quiet street, I realized something. My journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. The future was still uncertain, still full of unknowns, but I didn't feel afraid anymore. I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in months, maybe even years. For the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face what came next. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about me, about the person I had become through all of this. The person I was finally starting to reclaim. The journey wasn't linear. It wasn't clean. There were days when the past tried to creep back in, tried to remind me of the pain, of the betrayal, of the love that had been lost. But I wasn't defined by those moments anymore. I wasn't defined by her, by the marriage, by the past. I was defined by what I did with this new beginning, by how I chose to move forward. So I made my choice. It wasn't easy, it wasn't simple, but it was mine. I chose peace. I chose to let go. I chose to embrace the uncertainty, because in that uncertainty I found freedom. As I watched the last of the sunlight disappear below the horizon, I understood something. The future would come, and I didn't need to fear it. It wasn't about finding closure. It was about living. It was about standing tall, in the face of everything that had tried to break me, and deciding to live on my own terms. For the first time in so long, I felt ready to face whatever came next.